Okay, thank you very much. And you click down, do you, to change?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. It's a great pleasure for me to be here this morning. Is it on now? Yes, okay. I want to talk this morning in this venue, which I think is a very appropriate venue, about the personalization of medicine and the common good. Now, the common good is an ancient concept from Catholic theology, going back to Aquinas, and previous to that, Aristotle. So I think it's appropriate here. But more broadly, I want us to continue to bear in mind throughout our discussions, as we have begun to do, the importance of the common good and of what I call we medicine. Barbara very kindly referred to my book yesterday, which is called Me Medicine versus We Medicine. And I want us to bear we medicine in mind, as well as personalized medicine, me medicine. Okay, going back again to the classical reference, I want to ask whether what we are seeing here really is a revolution, or whether it is merely a continuation of traditional goals of medicine. It was Hippocrates who said it is more important to know which patient the disease has than which disease the patient has. And I'm sure that's a familiar quotation. Now, it might therefore be thought that all good clinical practice is already personalized, and has been for a long time. However, the phenomenon that's being presented as a paradigm shift, which I think we should examine as to whether that's true, we did to some extent yesterday, is more specific, this so-called revolution of personalized medicine. Whether it really is revolutionary is an issue that I will examine critically. So I'm merely repeating what we've already said, and in a sense I'm oversimplifying it. So personalized medicine then, or precision medicine, builds on the achievements of genomic science, we all know this, and hopes to offer doctors and patients more sophisticated tools based on molecular profiling. I know that we discussed this yesterday, and it is a slightly oversimplified definition, but I felt I needed some definition at the start. And pharmacogenetics, which is probably the most advanced arm of personalized medicine, though we might discuss that, also aims to minimize adverse drug reactions as well as to produce better response by tailoring pharmaceutical regimes to the patient's individual genome. Now, in my paper, I've actually given a lot of examples from oncology and elsewhere, which I will not repeat, and the previous speaker has already given us many examples. I want to dissect this term, precision medicine, I think. One might hope that all medicine would be as precise as possible. So what's new about that? Just as Hippocrates said that all medicine should be as personalized as possible. But some proponents and some lawmakers are actually shifting the nomenclature from personalized medicine to precision medicine. And I think it's interesting if we look in the US, for example, at the Personalized Medicine Act of 2007, which was proposed by then Senator Obama, using that terminology. And he said, we are in a new era of the life sciences, but in no area of research is the promise greater than in personalized medicine. So he used the term personalized medicine. But by 2015, when the Precision Medicine Initiative was set up, also under Obama, it was being called exactly that, precision medicine. And the accompanying cohort, which is now called All of Us, was originally termed, using the precision terminology. Now, in these initiatives, particularly I think in personalized medicine, the language of individualization is very dominant. And for example, we have this statement which came from the White House accompanying the Precision Medicine Initiative. So until now, this statement said, most medical treatments have been designed for, quote, the average patient, the, quote, one-size-fits-all approach. That terminology is used a lot. Precision medicine, on the other hand, is an innovative approach that takes into account individual differences in people's genes, environment, and lifestyles. And in my book, Me Medicine versus We Medicine, which was published by Columbia in 2013, and in another book which I co-edited, which came out from Cambridge last year, we have drawn a lot of attention to this language of individualism. And I also gave a TED talk 2 months ago in which I emphasized that language of individualization. That should be out on the web soon. But I think although individualism is very natural to most people, in the Western world at least, and particularly I think in the English-speaking world, less prevalent, for example, in France and perhaps in Italy too, it's controversial and it's difficult. For a start, as we've already heard, completely individualized treatments, one person, one drug, are unlikely to be feasible. If they were feasible, they would almost certainly not be affordable, except for perhaps Bill Gates. So one drug for one person is not really what we're talking about. So it's not individualism in that sense. And the clinical approach tends to be, as I was saying yesterday, stratified medicine and diagnosis and treatment stratified into patient groups, which is not the same as individuals. And I have a lengthy quote here, which is from the editor of a genomics journal, who was interviewed in Eric Jungstedal's article From Personalised to Precision Medicine, which I think came out in the Hastings Center report in 2016. I don't think that we can ever become truly personal and truly individualized. The way I look at personalized medicine is whereby we stratify patient groups, respective of ancestry, ethnicity, and so forth, into individuals who are more likely to respond using novel technologies. So I see a way of being able to subphenotype individuals in the way they're going to respond to drugs. And that's what I see as personalized medicine. So I don't see it as individual. And yet I'm fairly willing to bet that most patients do. So the term stratified medicine is not as good a brand as personalized medicine. And I'm not suggesting that personalized medicine uses the term personalized merely for branding, but it is not as appealing. It lacks the powerful appeal of personalized with its promise of individual choice and patient empowerment. And particularly in the direct-to-consumer testing industry, we do see that very deliberate appeal, and there, because of course it is commercial, it may be more a matter of branding. So, for example, one direct-to-consumer genetic testing firm says, we use the latest science and technology to give you a view into your DNA, revealing your genetic predisposition to important health conditions, and empowering you with knowledge to help you take control of your health future. So this is very much the language of the individual patient taking control, being a responsible patient. And it is particularly prevalent in that literature. We haven't really talked very much about direct-to-consumer testing companies, but for example, in Francis Collins' book, The Language of Life, he began by urging people to take up those opportunities. And we know that these are still, flourishing, despite the FDA temporary ban on 23andMe, which has now been lifted. So such testing, direct-to-consumer, is the self-proclaimed vanguard of personalized medicine, and therefore I think it's important to look at the language. Now, these promises of empowerment, I would say, are illusory. I know that's fairly strong, but I want to offer a critique here, and I think the empowerment promises are something that we do need to treat critically. So, personalized genomic medicine the label rather, promises more than genomic science can actually deliver at this point. It's beginning to deliver, but at this point it cannot deliver the full panoply. In terms of patient empowerment, and this is something we haven't yet looked at, it might even diminish patient choice. Why do I say that? Well, because I think it means two things. One, that probable non-respondents might be denied treatments that they would actually like to have. It might be that they would respond less well, but if that is the only treatment, they might still like to have it. And the decision might be taken out of their hands, either by cost or by the decision being reduced to, say, something like an algorithm, which is mainly in the hands of genetic counselors and genetic experts. So it might leave these decisions in the hands of physicians, also pharmaceutical firms, in terms of what they choose to concentrate on in their production, and genetic counselors. Now, stratified medicine, if I use that term, can lead to stratospheric prices. And I mentioned yesterday the cystic fibrosis drug, which NICE, the National Institute for Health and Clinical Excellence in the UK, has decided does not meet the usual standard, which is £30,000 per QALY. It's about 10 times that, I believe. And so it's being denied to patient populations. And this, of course, always leads to huge outcry, and understandably so, from the patient population. But it certainly doesn't give them a sense of greater empowerment. So the pharmacogenetic ethos of the right treatment for the right patient at the right time may heighten overall efficiency, and I believe someone mentioned that yesterday, that this is likely to lead to more overall efficiency, but it won't necessarily enhance patient rights or the sense of the common good. And I now come on to that concept. So if we go back to the original foundations in the Human Genome Project and in the UNESCO Universal Declaration of 1997 and the 1996 Bermuda Statement, if we look at these legal treaties and statements, the original ideals and beliefs behind genomic medicine were communitarian. They were not individual. And I think that is a really important point, because in the rush and the use of the terminology around personalized medicine and the amount of publicity it has attracted, I think we are beginning to lose sight, we risk losing sight of these original ideals. And for example, the idea of the genome as the common heritage of humanity was stated in the UNESCO Universal Declaration, to which 40 countries have adhered. Unfortunately, not the UK. But it is widely accepted. And what do I mean by these communitarian ideals? Well, or what do I mean by we medicine, because that is communitarian medicine? Well, it can refer to either our genetic relatedness, the common human genome, different alleles, obviously, or it can refer to distributive justice as fairness, or global public goods, such as the genetic commons, which I think is a very powerful idea, and which has been used in rationales against intrusive genetic patenting, or exclusive, rather, genetic patenting. So the idea that the genetic commons should be protected from enclosure by private patents, and which is to some extent reinforced in the Myriad decision in the US. So by focusing on this concept of the common good, I want to ask this not really rhetorical but genuine, I think, question of whether personalized medicine might undermine the common good. For example, if more resources are devoted to pharmacogenetic treatments, some of which are, as we've seen, very expensive, will there be less money for public health services? We are already in an era when public health measures are being cut back, and to some extent this has always been the Cinderella service, or a Cinderella service, but with austerity, we have seen cutbacks in many countries. So will this tend to worsen the trend? And if that were the case, then the idea that actually personalized medicine is both more efficient and more equitable would be undermined, would be untenable. Now, this is important again because we medicine, by which I'm meaning public health medicine, but also more generally communitarian-based medicine or communitarian focus ideals, has, as we heard yesterday, led to many of our greatest successes in terms of increased lifespan. And if we sort of collapse the different measures into sanitation, which led to huge improvements in the 19th century, screening later, vaccination, which is very much of an issue now, it is these measures that led to radically improved lifespans in the 19th and 20th centuries by lessening the incidence of contagious disease, but also by screening genetically. So this phenomenon is not merely historic, and it's not limited to infectious disease. There was a very influential article by Joyner and Panath, 7 Questions for Personalized Medicine in JAMA in 2015, which said most of the recent successes in cancer care have resulted from the traditional public health measures of screening, early detection, and smoking reduction, as well as some immunological therapies. And this solidarity-based we-medicine approach, I know Barbara Prainsack has written extensively on this concept of solidarity, could produce better policies in other areas, from palliative care, as you suggest, to organ donation, so not limited to cancer care, to oncology. In my book, I spend a lot of time looking at 4 other factors, because I think, given that we cannot say that we are yet in a position to be delivering vast successes in me medicine, why has it attracted so much publicity? And I suggest that we also need to look at more economic, political, and sociological factors. And I've listed 4 of them, which I use as hypotheses. I don't actually say these are necessarily true or false, but I use them as devices around which to critique personalized medicine. And that was further developed in the set of essays which appeared in 2018 on these 4 factors in that Cambridge book, which I mentioned earlier. Other scholars taking up these 4 factors and debating them. And the I suggest. So first of all, I think there is a widespread societal sense of threat and contamination. We talked yesterday about the anti-vaccination movement, or vaccination resistance, or whatever you want to call it, and a lack of confidence in those traditional public health resources. We've also had blood transfusion scandals in the UK and France, which led to a lack of confidence in the blood service. At the time, of course, when Richard Titmuss wrote his famous book on the UK blood service, there was a great deal of public trust, but we then had a series of different problems, which led to a widespread sense of distrust. And we mentioned yesterday the general sense of distrust in experts, which may have led to the anti-vax movement. I'm not entirely convinced about that, because Andrew Wakefield, of course, presented himself as an expert, although he was a gastroenterologist. So in that sense, not an expert on autism. But it was the fact that he had some professional expertise that gave him credibility. And then I examined quite critically the broader trend towards narcissism and self-fixation. So I was at Emerald Lake in Canada last summer, lovely place, and everyone there was taking selfies of themselves, so you couldn't actually see the lake very well. You could mostly see people with their selfie sticks. Now, I know this is a bit of a flip remark, but there have been a number of scholarly contributions on what is seen as a broader trend towards narcissism, and I'm thinking particularly of the book by Twenge and Campbell called The Narcissism Epidemic. So the idea then, which I identified earlier in the quote from the direct-to-consumer genetic testing company, genetics being promoted as consumer genetics, as finding out more about me, and as being the responsible thing that an individual would do in terms of their health. So that's another possible factor. A third factor, I think, is to look at corporate interests and strategies. So the expiry of patents on big blockbuster drugs, such as Viagra or Prozac, may have led, excuse me to the typo there, has led to a new strategy of stratified markets with higher prices. Now, I know that's somewhat of an oversimplification, but I think it is important that we do look at, since corporations are the ones who have to translate these measures and deliver them in terms of drugs, what their strategies are. And then finally, I think it is very important that we bear in mind the sort of rhetoric around personalized medicine as celebrating personal choice, individualism, and autonomy. And these are almost sacred values in our society. So it leaves the common good rather neglected, I think. The language of the common good, although found in statements such as the UNESCO Declaration, are seen as somewhat airy-fairy, a bit pie in the sky. So it leaves the common good comparatively neglected. And I think it is important to look at those factors. I can't do so at any great length in this time limit, but my book is available if you want to do that. Okay, so individualism and the common good, then, to sum up. Rather than taking personalized medicine at face value, I'm arguing that we should examine such social and economic factors behind its promotion as the 4 hypotheses which I just listed. We should also, I think, emphasize communal values and the common good. And in my recent TED talk in Oxford, I said, are individual choices and preferences the only values that medicine should promote? I don't think so. In my view, we medicine values, such as solidarity, caring for others, and societal trust, need to be actively promoted as well. They may not be as glamorous or attention-grabbing, but that's all the more reason to give them deliberate attention. We shouldn't forget we medicine in the flurry of publicity around me medicine. Thank you.